Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday the 13th, 2013. Big surprise, Syria is once again the top story in the news. This past week, we heard from both President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin, the two superpowers standing over Syria. First, President Obama. He addressed the nation this week and laid out his case for why we should attack Syria and punish Assad for using chemical weapons. Of course, he didn't really lay out exactly the plan and what the outcome would be, but he did say we should punish the Assad regime for using chemical weapons because they broke all international norms, and they could eventually be used against us or our allies. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin this week put out an op-ed piece, and of all places, the New York Times. Now, some people were up in arms about this and angry. I wasn't. I wanted to see what it is, what the message was that Vladimir Putin wanted to give us. And some people were offended. I'm not. I think he had a definite reason, and I think I know what it is. He wrote in his piece, one of the main things I saw in the piece, he wrote that if the U.S. strikes, it'll only make things worse. I'm paraphrasing, but here's what he exactly said. He says, if the U.S. strikes, it would spread the conflict far beyond the Syrian borders. Let that sink in. He said a U.S. strike would be spreading the conflict far beyond Syria's borders. I think that's one of the main points he wanted to get through in his op-ed piece, a warning of a wider war. What I've been telling you is what the president of Russia is saying. Yes, I know he's a former KGB agent, and he's no stellar guy on human rights. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about war. Putin said that the chemical weapons were used by the al-Qaeda-backed rebels, and they only did it to draw the U.S. into this conflict, that the Assad regime didn't do it. The White House counters and says, oh, no, it was the Assad regime. And Hezbollah is helping the Assad regime along with Iran. Now, you can go back and forth on this. And listen, a deal where the possibility of Kerry might be able to get Assad to give up his chemical weapons is not a done deal. That's one of the things that Kerry is working on in the meantime. The president brought it up in his speech. I mean, there's a lot of complications, even with that little wrinkle, the Russians want 30 days. I mean, Syria has one of the biggest chemical weapons stockpiles on the planet. When Libya decided to give up its chemical weapons, it took them 10 years to get rid of the stuff, destroy it. The Obama administration doesn't want to give 30 days. They think they're being played, and they may be. The president of Syria, Assad, he says, hey, unless you give up the use of force, no deal on the chemical weapons. That's what Putin says. And, of course, Kerry and Obama, they don't want to give that up. That's how they got to the point they are now. They threatened to use force. Some people say the president's plan is, incompetent, quote, incompetent or schizophrenic. These are the words people have been using to describe the president's foreign policy and plans. Other people say the president has made some smooth moves, like turning a vote over to Congress, which I don't think he has the votes. I know in the House, and I don't think he has the votes in the Senate, because this is a sticky wicket. And people are sick of war, and people are calling into their congressman's office and their senator's office, at 10 to 1 and 15 to 1, according to some people in Congress, and saying, no war, don't do it. Well, no matter what you call it, I think this is one of the most, if not the most, tenuous, complicated, and dangerous situations the country has ever faced. In my mind, any U.S. strike, perpetrated on Syria, any targeted or limited strike is going to garner a giant size downside. And in my mind, I think any U.S. strike will kick off World War III. And that is precisely the way Congress should vote on it. Do we want World War III or do we not? As the president said, the U.S. military doesn't do pinpricks. My point exactly. And remember what Vladimir Putin said, that he's worried about it spreading the conflict far beyond Syria's borders. Meanwhile, as the Syrian conflict simmers, Russia has decided, I guess they feel pretty emboldened now, Russia has decided to sell Iran sophisticated anti-aircraft missiles. You know, they were talked out of doing this by the Obama administration in 2010, but now it's game on. They're going to sell them the missiles. They also want to build Iran a nuclear reactor. The U.S. and Israel has been trying to get Iran to curtail its nuclear ambitions. They're afraid they're going to build a bomb. Iran, of course, says it's for the peaceful production of energy, but either way, can you see how this even further mucks up the waters in the Middle East? The Middle East is more complicated than I've ever seen it in my entire life. It's a very dangerous situation. Back at home, the U.S. Congress faces enormous economic challenges. Number one, the budget. Number two, the debt ceiling. Let's start with the budget. If we don't get a budget or some kind of a resolution, which I think they'll get to kick the can down the road, I mean, the government could shut down. And then we have conservatives inside the Republican Party that say, hey, we want to defund Obamacare. I mean, after all, the president doesn't want it. He's exempt from it. The Justice Department, Eric Holder, exempt from it. Congress, their staff, exempt from it. Hundreds of other unions and companies are exempt from it. The IRS, who's supposed to enforce it, doesn't want it. They want an exemption from Obamacare. It's not good enough for them, but it's good enough for everybody else in America. The conservatives want to defund it. They think it's a job killer, an economy killer. I say they're not going to be able to win that fight, or they're going to shut the government down. I mean, it's law. It's going to kick in fully in 2014, and I say they should just let it go so we can finally see what is really in Obamacare. Meanwhile, the debt ceiling debate, also a big thing coming up a couple of weeks after, the October 1st deadline with the, budget, shutting down the government. We have to have a new budget October 1st. That's when the year begins for the U.S. government. Then we have the debt ceiling. We have to increase the debt ceiling or we're going to default on our debt. There's all kinds of mishaps that can happen. Yes, I guess we'll raise the debt ceiling. Yes, I think we'll have some little resolution that'll kick the can down the road, but the rest of the world might not buy it. And I'm not talking about our credit rating being cut. I'm talking about maybe the bond vigilantes come out. Maybe the dollar is trashed. The dollar is in a very, very vulnerable position. We've got $17 trillion and counting in debt. We're going to raise it by another couple of $1 trillion. We've got $220+ trillion in commitments we're never going to pay for that people like economist Lawrence Kotlikoff say we have. $222 trillion at last count. That's what we are on the hook for. All Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and military spending and bank bailouts, and that's what we're on the hook for. $222 trillion, but our current deficit is $17 trillion. The rest of the world has been working feverishly to try not to use the dollars, all kinds of agreements where they're not trading in dollars in Asia. At some point, the rest of the world is going to stop using the dollar. That is going to happen. And when that happens, Americans are going to face a stunning loss of standard of living. Stunning. I mean, could gas be $15 a gallon? A loaf of bread be $25? I don't know. Gold took another hit this week. And I wonder what went on. I mean, with all this debt and all this calamity and all this war, and listen, I think traders think maybe we won't have war. We'll get a deal with the chemical weapons in Syria and they'll give them up. That's not a done deal. I think ultimately, I don't think that's really what they really wanted. They didn't want them to give up their chemical weapons. They wanted Assad out of power. Remember that? He's got to go. That's what the president said. And now they're giving more arms to Syria. But gold took a big hit this week. And I called up my friend Gregory Manarino at TradersChoice.net, and I asked him, I said, hey, was it naked short selling? He goes, it might be some of that. Yeah, sure. He says, but I think it's also real selling. People are selling the paper ETF, the Exchange Traded Fund, GLD. They're selling that paper exchange traded fund, and they're turning right around and they're buying the physical metal at a discount. He says, that's what I think's going on. And, at some point, GLD will be adios. He also said that gold for delivery at COMEX is at record all-time lows. And you got to ask yourself, why are so many rich people, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, and countries like China all lining up to gobble up all the gold in the world they can? What do they know and see coming that the rest of us don't know or see coming? Finally, new documents released by the government shows the NSA spy program grew, their words, grew out of control. Take a look at this newspaper story right here. This is an AP story, and then remember, these are documents that were released by the government, and the documents showed that the officials who were supposed to keep the spying on Americans in check, here's the quote, wait for it, didn't understand the system and didn't understand what they were told. They didn't understand the system, and they didn't understand what they were told, and the spy program grew way out of control. Exactly the way Edward Snowden blew a whistle on it. I think this is pretty much vindication for Edward Snowden. And maybe we should drop all the charges, or maybe we should greatly reduce them and bring him home. I don't think that'll happen, but that's what we should do. Thanks for supporting USA Watchdog. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for using the donations button. Appreciate that. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Have a nice weekend.